garbage day. Can you see the garbage behind me? I just put the garbage out. I guess Americans call it trash, don't they? Anyhow, good morning. It's Joe here. And I'm on my way to work, so I thought I'd do the video in the car for a change of scenery. It's a gorgeous spring day. Oh, spring is here. I'm going to take that cane out because that's ignorant. We have something out in the country called killdeer birds, which are so cute. They run around on the lawn, but they act, as soon as a person approaches them, they act like they have a broken wing, so that because they nest on the ground, they would rather you follow the predator, follow them, than go near the eggs or go near the babies. So when I first moved out here last spring, I saw tons of them, and I was freaked right out. What the hell's this? But they're adorable. They're really an interesting species. Okay, so actually, I can tie that in. I really could tie that in a roundabout way. I'm getting over a terrible cold, by the way. So it's Fridays with Joe, GenderqueerChat. This week's topic is, are you out at work? And if so, how does it affect you? I think something along those lines. So I have a little bit of trouble with the word out, because what am I out about? I'm so Canadian. I know that just sounded so horribly Canadian. Out and about. Because I guess I want to use the word authentic. I have always been authentic. I've never appeared to be something I'm not, ever. So in a sense, my whole life I've been out. Did I have words for it? No. So if people asked me, was I a lesbian, I would say no, because I wasn't. And a lot of people did presume I was a lesbian. And so I always thought, if I was a lesbian, I would be out. Of course I would be, because that would be just an authentic life that I tend to live. But I have a very obnoxious personality at times. I'm very, very opinionated, and I have a really big mouth, and I've never not been that way. I've always been that way. And I've always been that way in all aspects of my life. So at work, at school, at home, in pleasant company. So, out as in being authentic, yes, I am out at work. I have used the word genderqueer with certain people at work in conversation to kind of give them the idea that there's something other than the gender binary when the discussion has come up. It's common knowledge that if you call me Joanne, I will bite your head off, that my name is Joe. It is also common knowledge that the women at work do not invite me to participate in the women's activities because I threw a fit the last time that happened. They invited me to, I think it was yoga. They're having yoga at lunch at my office on Wednesdays or something, and they invited all the women, and they didn't invite any of the men, and I just flipped, and I sent the email back, and I said, do not invite me to gendered activities. If you're not going to invite everybody, I have no intention of going. I don't like exclusivity. And they all came back and said, well, it's not that we didn't want to invite the guys, just that they won't come. And I'm like, well, how do you know unless you invite them? And sure enough, none of them wanted to go, because they were all invited and nobody went. But that was not the point. You know me and my points. So that aggravated me to no end. I am a very authentic person. The problem, a lot of what I'm out about is just my alternative lifestyle, I guess. Because I'm 38 and I'm not married and I don't have kids. I had my tubes tied at 26, which indicates I don't want kids. That sets me apart from the vast majority of people. And usually people kind of tiptoe around that subject. If you're an older woman with no kids, people presume you're infertile, or if you're not married, they presume you haven't met the right guy. We have one guy at work who's single and about 40, and he lives in his mother's basement and plays video games. He's that guy. And everybody just presumes he's, the eternal bachelor, and he'll never have a girlfriend, and he'll never get married, never have kids. And there's a real stigma attached to it, And I do a lot. I work very hard at shattering that stigma, because this was a choice that I made, and this is a life that I choose, and it's a life that I like. And a lot of people don't get that. So I work very hard to be out about my choices, to be out about my authentic life, that this was the life I've chosen. And what you see is what you get with me. It's not like I'm trying to be something I'm not at work. Well, God, if this is me trying to be professional at work, what the hell is me unprofessional? In my life, I've had a lot of jobs. when I was 30, I made a list, and I had 40 jobs by the age of 30. Now, that included stuff like babysitting when I was a teenager, and also I worked at a temp agency for some time in the 90s, and I worked like in 6 different factories, and you name it, I've done it. You name it. I've scrubbed toilets, I've worked on an assembly line, I've bartended, I've, this, that, and the other, basically. Offices, restaurants. Anyway, in every job I've ever had, I've always been myself, and as a result, I don't make friends too easily, and I don't make, the management typically raises an eyebrow at me, because I'm pretty loudmouth about my opinions. For example, when I bartended, the place was owned by, not that it really matters, but some Syrian guys. They were immigrants to Canada, and they had just, I think, some opinions about the way to run a bar, and one of them was, they treated the waitstaff pretty poorly, the bartenders. So one day I worked, I think, Christmas or Easter, and when I got my paycheck, I wasn't paid the time and a half, which is law in Canada, if you work the scheduled day before the scheduled day after. So I brought it up to my boss, and I said, you have to pay me time and a half, because I worked the days around it. And he said, no, I don't. He said, this is not a factory. As if in a factory you get paid, legal wages, and you have to abide by labor laws, and in a bar you don't. So I remember giving him a piece of my mind and bringing in the sheet with the labor law on it, and he paid me, and the very next week my shifts were cut all to hell, and I think I was never full-time again after that. And that's legal. You can cut, a waitress's shifts or whatever. A waitron's shifts. I love that word, waitron. Serving staff, bartender. Anyhow, I don't make friends too easily, and management typically doesn't like me no matter where I work. Partially because of a really bad attitude. Not a bad attitude. I think I have a good attitude, personally. One workplace I unionized. I actually unionized one workplace, and when I quit that job, management walked me to the door. They didn't even give me, I gave 2 weeks notice. They said, no, you can leave right now. That was kind of funny. Because it was never a secret that I was the one who was the head organizer in the union. I'm going to go around an S-curve, so I'm going to hold off a second here. So yeah, it does affect me at work for sure. I'm not popular with the management. My coworkers too. I think people have one way of behaving at work and one way of behaving in life, and I've never understood that, and I've never abided by that. Well, there's been times at this job where it was making me so miserable I really had to draw a line in the sand. But as far as my gender identity goes, or my sexuality, it's never ever been a secret. Now, again, like I said, I don't know that I've used the word genderqueer specifically with my boss. I probably have. He's the kind of guy that I would say stuff like that too. I like freaking people out. And I do work in a union environment. My job is very secure. They can't fire us. So, the fact that I'm a little bit gender bendy doesn't, there's no way they could fire me or even reprimand me or anything. Plus, it's a very gay positive and queer positive work environment. We have queer positive policies. We all had to take positive space training. And let me rephrase that. It's queer positive in theory. My particular department is very, very sexist, very homophobic, very homophobic. I'm dodging birds here. They're all out in full force this morning. Anyhow, but it's funny because at my workplace, even the bosses, although they're homophobic, they know they're not allowed to be overtly homophobic because they will get reprimanded, and they did. I'll tell you funny. It's not funny. It's actually horrible. I was at the positive space training some years ago, and they were handing out statistics that gay youth are something like 5 times more likely to commit suicide than straight youth. They were just handing out statistics, and I was sitting in between my boss and a colleague, and my idiot colleague said, "Good, less of them," and my boss laughed. And I was sitting in between the two of them, and I was mortified. So many years later, when we had another positive space training seminar, I brought it up, and I was telling the person who was running the web workshop, and the whole room fell silent. I'd almost forgotten that that's abnormal behavior in a school board. You can't be that overtly hostile and overtly homophobic and hateful and get away with it. You can't in the school board. But I'm in it every day, and I forget that it's actually frowned upon because anyway. and I said no. And then my boss's boss piped up and he said, no, but I'm his boss and I am. So needless to say, that night my boss got in very big trouble, or the next day. So the next day we had a meeting, and Mike Weir is the guy's name. He's a golfer. Mike Weir, W-E-I-R, I think. Somebody was talking about him, and somebody else in my department went, hey, Mike Weir. Who's queer? Mike Weir. And anyway, my boss, who normally would laugh at that shit, got stone-faced, and said, I said Mike Weir, not Mike Weir. And he goes, and that's not funny, or something. And I just felt like this very small victory, because the fact that he's watching what he says, even if it's just around me, it's very sad that it has to just be around me, that he can still be his homophobic self. Outside when I'm not around. But it's a small victory, and it took a colleague to remind me of that you take what you can get in this life. And I like to think that I live as an example of, alternate lifestyles or whatever, and that if I can be out and proud and happy, and pride is a huge part of it. Being proud of who you are, no matter what you are. It's like a Lady Gaga song. I hate Lady Gaga, but it's true. You should be proud of who you are. Even if it's weird, and even if it's different, and even if it's, you don't have a lot of friends. Okay, if I'm in Smithville, that means I'm about 15 minutes into my trip, so I need to stop